Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the latest episode of Here's What We Know, the podcast of unexpected conversations. And this young man sent me his book and said, hey, we should talk. And I read his book and said, yeah, we should. Before I get started, I wanted to encourage you to go and visit our sponsors, check out their businesses, because without them, we can't do this. So I just want to say that right there. His name is Steve Hines. He wrote this book, Salt, Light, and Kids. And he's had an interesting life so far. And we're going to get into how to parenting well today's culture with a biblically based parenting approach. And also just the story of what all's going on. Steve, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much.
From Hoover, Alabama.
Born in Nashville, moved to Birmingham when I was 5, and then moved back to Nashville 4 years ago. But spent most of my life in Birmingham/Hoover.
I'm from L.A., Lower Alabama.
That's right. I saw that.
I grew up right on the Florida-Alabama line in a little town called Florida. And I went to high school in Alabama, and my brother went to high school in Florida, and we lived in the same house.
Yeah.
So,
and that's why we're both Alabama fans, I guess.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
You know, I tell you the secret. My mother-in-law has no idea what to get me for birthdays and Christmas. So I get Alabama gear every year.
Yeah, of course.
I've never bought a piece. But in your honor, since I knew I was going to be talking to a Bama guy, I went and put on what I got for Christmas. My latest Alabama. If you guys just listen to the audio, go check out the YouTube channel if you want to see my sweet new Alabama sweatshirt.
Of course, in mourning from Saban,
But as we record this, Nick Saban has just retired. And by the time this comes out, there may be a new coach. There probably will be a new coach named by it. But as of right now, we're still in the oh my God situation.
Yeah.
So
good for him, though.
Well, at 72, he's done everything. You know, when you've done everything you want to do, and you have more money than your grandchildren or great-grandchildren can spend, and you see the mortality of on the wall, because, you know, Father Time is undefeated, right? None of us get out of here alive. And I like the idea that he sat back and said, you know what? How about I've devoted my career to me? My family has devoted everything to me. How about the last half of my life? I'm going to go back and devote everything to them.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to think happened. And, you know, from his wife's post on social media, it seems like that's where they're going.
Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what I like too. I, of course, don't like it because I'm a big fan of his, but I like that he knew when to go out on top. If you're a Seinfeld aficionado like I am, you think about George and showmanship.
Yeah.
But I digress. I love that he didn't ride the train down, which is inevitable when you get older, and, you know, like Mark Richt or some other people just kind of drove it to the ground. He had 4th and 31 this year, and then he beat Georgia and the SEC championship, and he knew when to go out on top.
Yeah, and I've read this. He's arguably seen that this is one of his best coaching years because the team wasn't as good as it ended up being.
Yeah.
Right. You see the team at the first part of the year and then losing to Texas and barely beating South Florida. And he coached them up. And it seemed like he had a lot more fun. And he didn't seem, you know, after the Michigan game, he wasn't crushed. Right. But he had done what he did. He's back on top of the SEC. And here's how you do it classy. You wait until after the championship game and then you leave. Yeah. He didn't take anybody's thunder away. So he let Michigan have their championship. He let the whole thing, because if he could have retired out of the Michigan game, who would have cared about the Michigan game?
Mm-hmm.
Who would have cared about the national championship?
I'll tell you another thing I've thought a lot about too, is kind of a life paradigm shift in our society. Is it would have had to have been so difficult with the changes with NIL and the transfer portal and all that to basically recruit 3 different classes. 1, you recruit your high school players. 2, you recruit in the transfer portal. 3, you recruit your players you have on your team because you don't want them to leave. And with the narcissism and the money of all the, you know, these young players, that would have been extremely difficult. And I'm sure with him being kind of a old soul and, the kind of person he is, like him or dislike him, he's figured it out, and has his morals and things he stands on. And it's just gone today in the, this young generation in a lot of ways. So that had to be really frustrating.
Absolutely. And you get to the point where it's like, I don't know if I want to put up with that, because it constantly changes. Trust me, the era that Bear Bryant grew up in was so much more different than the era that Curly Lambeau coached. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And neither one, they would have said, okay, that's football, but it's not what I do. And then when you got up, and now with the transfer portal, you're absolutely right. And Deion Sanders even said, he put out the tweet going, we've literally chased the goat away.
Right.
Is this what we want? Is this what we want in college football? And so it's an interesting take. And you have an interesting background because you were a coach. You were a coach for a long time.
Yeah, I did.
You coached lacrosse.
I coached lacrosse. It was a sideline full-time job. I coached junior high and high school boys lacrosse for 11 years, I think. But it was in addition to my full-time employment. So I was, burning the candle at both ends for a long time, but it was really great because I got to spend, I've always had a heart for young, trying to mentor young people, young guys in the 7th to 12th grade range. And my son was growing up and I was coaching him, which is good and bad. Depends on if you ask him or not in a lot of ways. But I did coach, and you can have so much impact, just like Saban, all his old players say, you can have so much impact for good for young people. And we need that today for sure, just because they're getting bombarded with, how great they are and their lack of humility and things like that. So yeah, it was a really good period. Last time I coached was 2 years ago, I guess. And I'm
still stunned that you coach lacrosse in the state of Alabama, because that's not the state of Alabama I grew up in. We never, my entire time growing up, there was never, I did not see soccer in person until I was a college student.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
My high school, I went to Vestavia. My high school, the first time there was a soccer team was my senior year. There was no lacrosse, and it came to Alabama, and it was just kind of a ragtag bunch of people that wanted to throw around, and we built that into a real league with 40 something teams. I think there was a lot. And then I ended up coaching up here in Nashville one year as well. So
did you play?
I did not. I just learned it.
Well, did you see that? I read this article about the guy who's the volleyball coach at Wisconsin, the women's volleyball coach, and they're like one of the most dominant teams in the country. He never played volleyball.
Yeah,
but he figured out what they need to do.
That's right.
And that's the concept. I said there, my father-in-law was saying, he doesn't like these people who do color commentary, who are on TV and they never played the game, blah, 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 blah. And then I had to remind him, Howard Cosell never played the game.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Costas never played the game. When you're talking about the game, that's not a skill set. Right? There's a different skill set that's why they pair all those guys. The Jim Nantz never played the game.
Right.
That's why you pair those people, because there's a skill set that comes along with it. And there's been so many athletes who tried to do TV. Joe Montana.
Couldn't do it.
Doesn't work. I'm still waiting to see if Tom Brady's going to work. Everybody goes, oh, and they're paying him a lot of money. I'm not convinced he will.
I am not either. I've seen Gronk lately, and I'm not sure he's that great.
Well, he just doesn't have the skill set for it. And when somebody does have the skill set for it, when you see a Tony Romo, or you see some of the studio hosts who are really good at it, and you're like, wow, who knew? Who knew?
Yeah. So,
and coaching, see, now I think I'm a little older than you, but here's the difference. You're on to grandkids. As we take this, I have an 11 and a 13-year-old.
Wow.
This is the face of optimism you're looking at right here.
I'm glad you read my book then.
Well, that's why I read it, right? Because, I have two boys. I have 11 and a 13-year-old, and I as I tell them, it took me that long to meet your mother. Right? Took me that long to find that. When I met her, I had no idea. I thought the chance of having kids had passed me by. And then on our first date, she's like, do you want kids? And I'm like, yeah. I didn't even think that was an option. Yeah.
Good for you.
And so it was awesome. And I think I'm much better at it than I would have been. If God had blessed me in my 20s, it'd be a different situation, right? Because you have a different relationship. But as I tell them, I spent the majority of my life being as selfish as anyone could be. I was the first thought when I woke up each morning, what I want to do. And I was the last thought when I went to bed at night. What do I want to do?
Yeah.
And I said, now I am 5th, 6th, sometimes 7th on the list. But I will tell you this, the farther down the list I get, the happier I get.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I thought kids were the greatest thing in most instances when I had them. And then when I had grandkids, I figured out that they were way better than kids.
Because you can give them back.
Yeah.
Here's my theory on grandkids. Because I was telling this to my wife. My parents had passed years ago. So I said, but here's my take on it. I want to try to stick around and see my children's children for this moment. That when they see their children and they are enveloped in a love they cannot understand, I want to go, hey, look at me. That's you and me.
Yeah.
That's you and me.
That's
now
right.
You know.
Yeah.
And I think why we do love grandkids is because we would love anything that someone we love so much loves.
Amen. I got to chill. My kids and their spouses and obviously my grandkids live here in Nashville, and I have a 5-year-old granddaughter, 2-year-old granddaughter, and then a grandson on the way due in several weeks. And the 2 girls, besides my wife, are my best friends in the world. Came over yesterday. We kept them 7 hours, I think, in between building a fort and playing hide and seek and teaching them to catch a ball and riding the scooters in our house. It's just the greatest thing ever. So I'm really, really fortunate to have that relationship with them for sure.
What do they call you? What do they call you? What do your grandkids
You'll
call
love
you?
this. BAM. Guess what it's short for?
I got nothing.
Bama. We couldn't go with Bama because it's probably a trademark issue. And I went through some other names with my daughter, and she's kind of like me. She's pretty strong-willed, and she's like, nope. When I come up, because I wouldn't want to be grandpa or whatever, because I'm just feel like I'm not the traditional named granddad. So she proposed Bam, and I was like, yeah, let's rock that. Roll Tide. And so I'm Bam.
Well, for me, it's different. Again, I'm in a different era of raising kids. I tell my wife, because like my mother-in-law she's not grandma, she's Gigi. Her name is Gayla. So Gigi is Grandma Gayla, but Gigi, right?
Right.
And my brother-in-law's father-in-law is not grandpa. You want to hear the best name of all time for a grandparent?
Lay it on me.
Uncle Chip.
Uncle Chip. And he's a grandfather?
And his name's not Chip.
And his name's not Chip. That is... See, that's the kind of thing I like.
Because he's like you. He's fighting the old. No. If I'm grandpa, I'm old. Oh, by the way,
that's right.
He's older than you and both of us, right? He's a good deal older than me. And as I always tell him, his name's Lindy. I'm always like, Lindy, you're the definition of grandpa.
Yeah.
For me
Uncle
though,
Chip, that's pretty good.
I'm gonna embrace it. I'm gonna be grandpappy. That's what I tell my wife. I want to be grandpappy. She goes, there is no way I'm gonna be married to a grandpappy. Right.
I threw out the name Diesel, and she shot it down. Diesel, which I was kind of kidding, but she wasn't having it. She's like, no way.
That would be, that'd be a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Now, what do they call your wife? What do the grandkids call your wife? What
Nemi.
now?
Nemi.
Nimmy.
Nemmy. Nemi. So we're
Nimmy.
Nemi and Bam.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Nobody wants to be grandma and grandpa anymore.
No.
We've aged out our, and the culture changes, right? The culture changes. And we all just sit back and go, gosh, I remember my grandparents and they were 5,000 years old and I'm not 5,000 years old. Look
That's
at me.
right.
I look good.
Yeah. I'm still building forts and riding scooters in the house, so I can't be grandpa.
No, we have a trampoline in the backyard, and years ago, my kids were like, "Hey, Dad, come in and jump on the trampoline with me." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to tell you, you have an old dad." No, Dad doesn't jump in trampolines anymore. Now, the good news is most of your friends, their dads are young enough to be my sons. They'll jump in that trampoline with you. That's good, right?
Yeah.
and it's gotten me out of coaching too. Most when your kids are playing small sports, they always want you to be a coach. But I'm always like, look at all these young dads. I think that'll be a better option. And everybody be like, yeah, you're right. That'd be a better option.
We have a trampoline.
You still jump in it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but they're 2 and 3.
Yeah, they're 2 and 5, but we get into some pretty serious jumping and battling and double bouncing each other and all that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that I come out unscathed. My knee will hurt or my back will hurt or whatever, but I'm gonna do it as long as I can.
Yeah, well, I'm just telling you, it's staring you in the face. And here in about 4 or 5 years, you'll go, no, I'm not. I'm going to let your daddy get up there and jump in the trampoline with you. That's what I'm going to do because, Bam needs to be able to sleep tonight.
That's right.
Bam's going to try to make it through the night without 6 leaves.
Yes. Hey, I'm the only person that I know, I think, or at least I've heard of, I've sprained my ankle several times sleeping. And I'll get up and fall on the floor when I step my foot down. And I'm like, how do you sprain an ankle while you're sleeping? But I have a lot of weird things like that, restless leg syndrome. And, I'm always the one with the weird injuries. So I just rock it though. I just kind of go with it.
I was sitting on the couch watching TV with my wife, I don't know, about a year ago. And all of a sudden I got a cramp in my knee and I went, and she goes, what's the matter? I said, I'm old. Man, I don't need that. There's no other excuse. I got nothing. Yeah. I don't know why. And give me 3 seconds, it'll go away. And it did. I'm absolutely fine. All right. Well, before all of our time goes up, and I wanted to do this, I wanted to talk about the book Salt, Light, and Kids as we talk about everything. And I warned you that. I warned you before we got on. I'm like, wherever the conversation leads is where I'm going to go.
I love it.
So first of all, tell me where you got the title, Salt, Light, and Kids.
The initial title, I'll tell you first. The initial title of the book was Leaving It All on the Field, with the sports metaphor of how important. I talk about this in the book. Actually, one of the chapters now is named Leaving It All on the Field, talking about how important it is as parents to 110% effort all the time, because for a lot of parents, parenting is kind of just another thing you do. So the initial title was Leaving It All on the Field. And then my editor, who's a woman, said, what does that mean? And I thought, well, I'm not going to have half the population not knowing what I'm talking about. So I changed it to Salt, Light, and Kids. And it was interesting because I probably had 20 working titles after that. And I was just praying, Lord, lead me to the title. And in the middle of the night, I don't know if it's a dream or if I woke up, but I woke up the next morning and knew exactly what the title was supposed to be, Salt, Light, and Kids, which is 2 things. When I started writing the book, and I can tell you the story about why I even wrote a book. I'd never written a book before, but I'm really convicted that people need to be salt of the earth in the secular definition, meaning be dependable and honest and hardworking and want to go the extra mile and all that. And I kind of started writing with more of a secular slant than God said, no, this has got to be about me. So I include both the salt of the earth in the secular definition and salt of the earth and light of the world, like Jesus talks about in Matthew 5. And so we want our kids today more than ever. I think parents who have a, really high level of interest in their kids and in how they parent, for them to be good people and to be lovers of Jesus. So Salt, Light, and Kids, parenting well in today's culture. And the well is a key part, because for most people, it's not hard to become a parent, but for everybody, it's hard to parent well. So that's kind of where the title came from. The Lord gave it to me in the middle of the night one night.
Now, I've read about how the book came into, and I wanted to talk over this experience with you. I actually saw a buddy of mine this morning, and I was sharing this with him, sharing the thought. I said, here's one of the things I want to ask him, because he said he was sitting in a car with his granddaughter who was asleep when the Holy Spirit talked to him.
100%.
Right?
100%.
And I'm like, I'm envious. I've had God give me feelings. I've had God speak to me through my children. Where they'll say something, and I'm like, I got you. I hear you. I got you.
Yeah.
But I've never had that feeling of hearing the voice. And I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
And just got to Holy Spirit chill again. Over my career, I've always been an entrepreneur and started companies and stuff like that. And it's always worked really hard. I started my first company when I was 26, so 30 something years of entrepreneurship. So the last couple of years, I've been feeling the Lord's kind of taking me out of the secular rat race, so to speak, and has been preparing me to do something different. I thought it would either be a minister somewhere, a pastor, maybe at a church, start a nonprofit, and you and I have emailed some before. I'm a musician, and I know we both have a love of music. And so when I moved here to Nashville, I started writing a bunch of songs and sending them places and things like that. And so one day, a little over a year ago, I was sitting in the car with my, at that time, 1-year-old granddaughter, and she was taking a nap. It was the middle of the afternoon. And of course, you don't wake them up. You let them sleep as long as they will. And so I told my daughter I'll stay in the car with her, and I'm sitting there in total silence, which is unusual because, we're always looking at our phones, or, something's, going on in our head. And I'm just sitting there. And like I said, that very rarely happens. And like a earthquake or a gunshot or whatever, the Lord, in no uncertain terms, said, I want you to write a book on parenting. And this was weird because I'd never thought about it ever, about writing a book on parenting. My wife and I had always taught parenting small groups and things like that for a couple of decades. So I had experience in that, but never crossed my mind. And I sat there, and it didn't take me 2 seconds to really confirm what it was that I was supposed to do next. And I went home and told my wife, I don't know why. And it just blows my mind, but I'm supposed to write a book on parenting. And I started writing, and I wrote the first draft. It's about 200 pages, I guess, in probably about 4 days. Everything was just pouring out. And I also mentioned in the first of the book, when I was typing, I felt like I was a scribe sometimes, and I don't want to be too weird, but when the Lord gives you words, you go with it. And so he has a message in this book I don't know if it's for, one small group to teach, or for it to sell 1 million copies and, change the world. I don't know, but it was one of the very limited times, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 in my life that I really feel like I heard his voice.
Wow. So, yeah, and I've not been blessed with that. And my buddy was telling me, he shared with me, he said, share me a time where the Lord literally just said, no, do this. And he goes, just like you and I were talking, because bring him here. That was the thing. Bring him here.
That's not, Gary, to discount what you said a minute ago. I mean, he speaks most of the time, almost all the time. He'll speak to us through the Holy Spirit in whispers. I say the Bible says, in just little nudges and things like that. Those are just as miraculous. Any, hey, don't send that. Like last night, I was sitting there, and, you can imagine social media is blown up. with Saban, particularly, with all my Alabama connections. And there's this Auburn group that was just saying he wasn't a good coach. He just had better players. And it was all people I went to high school with. And I just wanted to send something so bad. And I was about to start typing, and just the nudge was, don't. To be at peace with everyone, at least as far as it depends on you. So I didn't get up this morning. The same post is there when I look, and I don't spend much time on social media at all. And then I was going, okay, I need to say something, because people had added comments, all Auburn fans, and the Lord said no. And so those little nudges are just as miraculous. The Holy Spirit is, with believers all the time, and those little nudges, or if it's, a loud voice like Moses heard, it's all God talking to us.
Yeah. And the other thing about the Alabama thing is a friend of mine went to Michigan, graduated from Michigan. He texted me during the game. He goes, this one must be like to be an Alabama fan, right? And I said, I hope you're good enough, long enough to be hated.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody hates William and Mary. Nobody hates Arizona State.
Yeah.
Nobody does, right? Nobody hates Georgia Tech. You got to win, and win for a long time.
Yeah.
And as I always tell my friend, and I have a lot of friends who went to Auburn too. And the other side, they were all so complimentary, right? Because I saw their posts, and they were all like that. He was, we're going to look back. It was just like Bear Bryant. We had a chance to play against the greatest coach we ever.
Mm-hmm.
And actually beat him a couple of times.
They did.
You go that way and go, there it is. Well, it's daunting to the idea of I'm going to write a parenting book, because the first thing I would think is that after talking to you, I think anybody's sense of humility would have to be overcome, because your first thing is, why would anybody listen to me?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have all the answers, and I did things wrong. And my kids can tell you when I was just a bonehead. I tell my boys this all the time. There are going to be things about me you don't like, and you're going to go, I will never do that. And I'm all in on it, because I want you to be better at this than I am. Right? How did you overcome that?
In writing the book, my parent, I was always an overly confident person, because I was more sure of myself than anything else. And that's pride, and that's not the way to be. And so in parenting, the greatest news for my family was I had my wife, who we've been married 36 years next month. And we were a really good yin and yang together, and she kept me grounded and always made sure that I didn't go off the rails like I could do. But it's been interesting looking back. I see the errors we both made in parenting, and I wasn't trying in the book to say, here's what you need to do, and you'll come out on the other end with this type of kid. It's really a story of our parenting, good and bad. And you read the book, we have plenty of bad, and I didn't go into nearly all of it in the book, because I didn't want to incriminate my son mainly. But it's kind of, here's what we did, here's what we learned, here's what the Bible says. And hopefully from these stories, I tell a ton of stories, you can, relate and empathize in where your own situation is with your kids, and be benefited. The greatest thing that's happened, I think, since writing the book, though, my son, I mentioned, we're really close. I coached him all through the years. He was a good athlete, and he had a lot of wayward years, starting about where your oldest boy is age-wise, about 13. But now he turns 30 in a couple of months, and he is so sold out for the Lord, and he's read the book twice. He actually wrote afterward in the book, and he says, not long ago, probably about a month ago, he said, one of the greatest things was reading the book and knowing exactly what I'm talking about, because he was there. And at that time, I couldn't stand what you were doing, and I didn't understand it. But now looking back, it really makes sense what you and Mom were doing. And so it's really validating that even though we made a bunch of errors, mine mostly being impatient, and probably too demanding, to have both him and my daughter be, really in love with the Lord and have great marriages and all that. So it's not without, challenges by any stretch in our personal story, but it's great to see how they've turned out.
We're going to come back and pick up more on that story. How do you deal with a child in turmoil? So we're coming right back. More with Steve Hines on Here's What We Know.
Let's talk about the inevitable. End of life. Once I leave this earth, I can't do anything for my loved ones. But I've just learned by pre-planning a funeral or cemetery in advance takes the guesswork out when death occurs suddenly and your mind is clouded with grief. Dignity Memorial can help. My friend Tina Skurla pre-plans funeral and cemetery arrangements so loved ones don't have to. They're North America's largest provider of funeral, cremation, and cemetery services. They're dedicated to getting every detail right, and they do that by listening to you. I know it's a hard subject, but I also know we all see the sense and value of what Dignity Memorial does. Use the promo code Gary to get 25% off at Willow Glen Funeral Home. Reach out to my friend Tina Skurla today. She's committed to helping families not go through the tragedy of loss alone. Click on the link, use the promo code Gary, or email her at dmppatinaskurla.com or call 408-398-7050. If you're looking for Western wear, you need to find Winchester Western Wear at 1185 South Bascom Avenue in San Jose. You're not going to find the perfect outfit at the mall or the outlets. Come to the place with over 40 years of experience and all the top name brands like Ariat, Justin, Stetson, Tony Lama, and more. When you go to the great country shows at Shoreline, SAP, Club Rodeo, or Clola Shans, you'll be looking your best. From boots to hats to everything in between, with a knowledgeable staff that'll make the entire experience a fun one. Find them online at winchesterww.com. That's winchesterww.com. Or put this in your maps, 1185 South Bascom Avenue in San Jose. Winchester Western Wear. They'll help you find a look you love. If you suffer from ED or Peyronie's disease, there's great news. DermaWave. You and your partner don't have to give up intimacy. 30 years ago you did, but it's a new day. DermaWave helps regenerate tissue with an acoustic wave therapy that's non-invasive and pain-free. You may have noticed that medication starts to fade in effectiveness over time. DermaWave can possibly eliminate the need for it or make the medication more effective with a lower dose. Go to DERMAWAV.com and enter the promo code Gary to get 4 additional treatments for free. Don't give up on yourself. Go to DERMAWV.com today.
So you alluded to the book, and we don't have to go into details. I'm not asking you for that. But there was a trying time with your son, right? Where he was, as you said, going off of the path you had hoped he was going to be on, right? And it's so easy for us to lash out in anger. And I've told my kids this sometimes. I said, sometimes, and I've tried to be best. One of the things I've learned is I don't ever raise my voice. I don't, because I don't ever want them to be afraid of me. You can be afraid of disappointing me, but I don't ever want you to be afraid of me. I want you to know that I love you more than I love me, you know? And so, but when I do sound where I'm, everything is based on fear. Because I'm afraid for you. I'm afraid something's going to happen. I'm afraid, if you're walking out in the street, I'm not going to go, hey, come back. I'm going to go, get up, because I'm afraid for you. Because I can do the math where you can't do the math, right? I know 2 plus 5 equals 7, where you think 2 plus 5 equals orange.
Right.
How do you deal with that? How did you slowly pull him back in? I know your wife was involved in that, but this is father to father talk.
Right. Prayer, number one. I mean, I'll say this. I understood him a lot better than my wife did because I was a boy that was an idiot, at his age too. So I got it. My wife was one of 3 girls. And, every time something would happen and pretty serious stuff at times, she'd be like, I don't understand. I was like, I totally get it because, I did some of the same stuff back then. But, and of course she would start saying, are we parenting wrong? What are we doing wrong? And I would always say, and going back to the working title when I first wrote the book, Leaving It on the Field, and an encouragement that I give to parents all the time now is you're not really guaranteed of the result in what your kids are going to turn out to be. Sometimes, no matter what, it's going to be a really, really, really bad situation at some point. But we would always hang on the promise, train up a child in the way they should go. And when they're old, they won't depart from you. And that's the Lord. That's a promise from the Lord. And so I take that as a promise, and we always did. And then number two, with Leanne, my wife, I'd always say, we're trying as hard as we can. We're leaving it all on the field. We're completely invested in our kids turning out to be good, Christian people. And we blew it. Yeah, I blew it. She may have blown it, but as long as we're giving it everything we got to rest in that and, take solace in, he just had, the police just called us or whatever it is, but we're doing everything we can and we're doing it the right way with prayer, and asking God to guide us. And that's all we can do.
I love how you said it's the effort. The effort is the most important part, and in the biblical studies and stuff. And I, the Bible gives us a way to go. It's a common sense way to go, which is, these are the easy ways, as my pastor would say. This is him telling you, this is the way to an easy life. You can go away from it, but this is the way to an easy life. As far as an easier life than you go. One of the questions I did want to ask you is, how did you balance that? How did you balance parenting your daughter? Because when you have a child in trouble, they get all the attention, good or bad. They get all the attention. And the other one, like I'm from a family. I've got I got a brother and 4 sisters, right? And I've had one of them who had issues. And it was very hard because that one would get all of the attention, right? But when there's a bunch of you, right, it's easy to kind of not pay attention. I would think it'd be very hard when you have 2 kids. And we don't see many 5, 6, 7 kid families anymore. It's usually 1, 2, 3 kids. So I thought it was very interesting. How did you guys balance that when it came to your daughter, who did not seem, at least from the book, to be nearly as big of problems that were issued as your son gave you?
She was a totally different problem. She was the best behaved in terms of, partying and all that kind of stuff, but she had the worst attitude you can imagine. And a lot of it, and I say this not to be self-deprecating, but a lot of it was her resentment to me because we both have, in mine's mellowed some, thank the Lord, but we both had really strong personalities. So she was mad at me for 20 years. And so it was not the same problems, but it was still issues that we had definitely with her, just mainly attitude. And, sometimes those are worse than some of the other ones when they're consistent, and hers was pretty consistent. So she was not without challenge by any stretch.
That's the thing. I share this with my sons all the time, and I've said this story. And if you're a faithful listener to the podcast, you've heard this story before. But one of the biggest parenting lessons I ever had in my life was when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, and I was arguing with my mother about something, and I have no idea. Now you have to understand, I'm an oops baby. My oldest sister is 18 years older than me.
Wow.
Her son is 2 years younger than me, and he has 5 grandchildren. If you're doing the math, those are my great nieces and nephews.
Wow.
So by the time it was almost about being raised by a single mother, right? Because my next closest sibling was 4 years older. And I'm arguing about something, and to this day, I can't remember what it was. And she looks at me and she goes, "Son, the problem is you don't know what my job is." She goes, "My job is to teach you how to raise my grandchildren. And you may not hear any word I'm saying today, son, but one day you will cling to every word." Now, I can tell you why she said that because it was emblazoned in my mind. I can still see her face. I can see the sun behind her as she talked to me. And it was like the Lord said, that's what you're here for. So I tell that to my kids all the time, babe, I'm just trying to teach you how to do it. When your daughter comes up and goes, but Dad, I want you to be able to go, what'd the old man do? Let me think about that. You know?
Yes.
And again, it's the effort. It's not the easy, it's the effort. That's going to be the title of my book.
Yeah. The people, I just want to, encourage parents that are listening. You're going to make mistakes, and there is no set formula that works for every single kid. And you just have to pray for wisdom, and you have to give it everything you have. And sometimes giving it everything you have is doing nothing. I talk in the book some about letting kids fail, or, if they get in trouble at school, don't go bail them out. Let them handle it themselves. I think one of the biggest issues with the younger generations today, and like I never try to just blanket, throw a generation under the bus, but one of the issues I see with the younger kids of today is nobody wants to take responsibility for a fault, and everything's always somebody else's fault. And so I encourage parents, let your kids fail and let them get themselves out of it. For instance, at school, and I say this in the book too, we made a pact, Leanne and I, my wife, that we would never go to school and complain about or to a teacher or somebody in authority relative to our kids, unless our kids were in danger, were being bullied or something like that. But if they made a bad grade on a test, or if both of my kids were always the ones that had to sit in the front next to the teacher because they talk too much, and which is, believable, I guess, knowing my kids. And we just always let them suffer the consequences. And they learn how to be resilient and to have resolve and how to, deal with things that weren't that pleasant. And same, with coaches in sports. Hey, if your kid, has to run laps, maybe they need to run laps when they get home. Don't go as a parent and get mad at the coach. Why are you singling, Johnny out? And so one of the things I encourage parents to do is let your kids fail. I use the if you remember the bumpers in a bowling lane. Uh-huh. And I said, if your kids are bowling all the time with bumpers, they'll have better scores. But then if you take the bumpers away later in life, they're going to be throwing gutter balls all the time. Whereas when they're young, they're having a bowl without bumpers, i.e. mom and dad making their lives perfect and, always taking up for them. They'll have worse scores early on, but they'll be better bowlers in life. So
I completely agree with that. I understand, because we talked in your book, you talk about the participation awards. Everybody gets a trophy, which I think is cool up until a certain age. But here's the fun thing. If you have a truly competitive kid, I remember my son playing flag football when he was like 8, and they came in at second, and they had a medal for them, and he wouldn't go get the medal.
Good for him.
I went and got it because I knew he had won it later on, because, there were 12 teams and you came in second. That's pride. Mm-hmm. That's pride. That's something I'm proud of. But I was like, well, there you go. And I didn't make him go get the medal. I'm like, here, right, give it to me. And so, sure enough, a day later, he's like, should have got that medal. I'm like, yeah, I got it.
You don't want them to be poor losers.
Yeah.
But you also want them to value progress,
the effort,
and winning,
and the contribution that the team made. The mm-hmm. team did that. It'd be different if you're playing tennis, okay, right, or if you're playing golf. Those are individual sports. But when you're on a team, then you have to take pride in the team.
That's right.
Which leads me to that, because you did coach, and I get the feeling you were a pretty fair athlete, right?
Yes, I was.
So as I go through the sports journey, here's the story. My oldest is very good. He's one of those kids who just picks up a sport and he'll figure it out. And in this past year, his game has went whoosh, in everything he plays.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have been blessed in this way. I played sports, but I was never good. I enjoyed the effort. I was a good practice player, but in the game, I'd choke. And I told my kids that. I'd choke. Balls bounce off my face. I mean, yeah. But I never had, so I've never had to sit back and say, you should have done this, or this would have this. If you'd have done that, this and that and that. So I should never do that. My thing is he used to be very competitive, and if they had to lose a game, we'd take separate cars because his mother didn't want to be in the car with him if he lost. Right?
Right.
And my thing is I'd let him get his anger out and stuff like that. And he's so good about it now. He totally understands the concept now, where he'll be like, because I'm like, there's only so much you can do. You do what you can do. And right now it's all about the reps. It's all about how many you get to play. That's all you want to do is you want to play, because you need every minute you can get, no matter what sport you're playing. I think the difference is, though, I wasn't good. So I'm not about to sit back and go, and you should have. Now, if he ever gets into radio or podcasting, maybe I will go, hey, now I would have. How did you fight that? Or did you give into it?
As far as telling my son what he should do differently?
Well, and just handling sports, because you were an athlete.
Yeah.
My point is I wasn't an athlete. So
Right.
I had I always told him, the only thing I will ever say to you is if you have a bad attitude or if you do something that's not under the coach's purview. So if you sit back and yell or do something stupid, that ain't the coach's job.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's mine. And you don't want my job.
Right. One of my mottos in life, and it's always, because I played sports my whole life, and when I was coaching as well, was just win. And a lot of my life, I personally was not a good loser because I placed so much importance on winning. But in sports, the cool thing, if you're boys and girls, is you can teach so many life lessons. Like you're talking about your son, you can teach him, hey, losing's terrible. We need to know that nobody should be just fine with losing. And I'll probably have some people that disagree with me on that, but that's just the way I am. But how you handle losing is really important in terms of, in everything you do, whether it's losing sports or you get fired from your job or somebody gets a promotion over you, whatever, we have to have the mind of Christ and be humble and resilient and all that. But you said something about the attitude. That was the thing that bugged me with players more than, including my son, because he kind of had, my dad's the coach, and so I get benefits from that. And actually the opposite was true. I made sure he didn't get any benefit from that. But teaching the attitudes, just of the camaraderie and the support for each other, and not being, somebody that causes dissension on the team and things like that. So it was a big learning curve for me in coaching him, for sure.
We've had the conversation that I said, and you're enough of a sports nerd. It's not that Michael Jordan even said he didn't enjoy winning. He just hated losing.
Yes.
And if you watch that documentary with Michael Jordan, there's nobody I would rather not spend time with than Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
He just doesn't seem happy. Right. And when I see Jesus, when you sit back and you talk, there's more celebration in heaven when we get one wayward person to come back than all the righteous people. What that says to me is it's about the winning. Enjoy the wins. Don't base everything, but find the joy in the wins. Find the joy, instead of just glom on to the failure of losing. Right? That I think if you can enjoy the wins, you may not be Michael Jordan, but you'll be happier. And in the long run, that to me is where you want to be. And I know people send me emails right now going, I'd rather be Michael Jordan. Yeah, okay. I don't know. His kids can't stand him, and he's on his, third wife? I mean,
I think so.
Do you? And as far as I could tell, nobody is his close friend anymore. Mm-hmm. All the people he used to hang out with, Charles Barkley. Nobody, you just can't be around somebody who just wants to win and not lose all the time.
Right. Enjoy winning and and find grace in losing.
Well, I just think it's, especially today, and we talk about trying to raise kids today, and this is a different world than you and I grew up in. It's a different world than people 15 years ago grew up in. And it will be. I had a buddy of mine who was saying, my daughter is not going to have kids. And I'm like, why? He goes, how would you have kids in today? Can you see what all's going on in the world? And I looked at him and I said, I don't know about you, because he was older than me. I'm like, but do you remember they used to have us hide under desk for nuclear bomb attacks?
Yeah.
Do you think it was easy to have kids in the 1600s when they could die the first 8 years? The mortality rate of the first 8 years was astronomical. And yet they still found the hope, right? It's like, I encourage my kids all the time because I think we can influence them. I always tell them, I hope you have children. I hope you have a ton of children. My wife and I, because we're older parents, if we could have met each other much younger, we both agree we'd have had 6 kids.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt in my mind we'd had 6 kids. That they can be the biggest pains in my neck sometimes, but they are the most fascinating, joyful things I've ever been around.
Yeah, kids are awesome. And
I try to encourage it, and I don't know how many parents are doing that anymore. Because we all look at, oh, this and oh, that. They're a blessing. I mean, that's what it says in the Bible. If you're truly blessed, you have children.
Mm-hmm. Elon Musk thinks so too.
Well, yeah, it'd be nice if it narrowed down the motherhood things, but who am I to say? How many wives did David have? So, and concubines and,
Elon say he's preaching, everybody needs to have kids or we're going to, implode as a society. But kids, there's plenty of verses in Proverbs and all that about the quiver and all of that. And kids are great. I do have to say, I hear what your friend is saying, though. I think there's some challenges now in society that we didn't have, when we were young, and they didn't have, in the 1600s, mainly due to technology and social media. I think that's a whole new ball game in terms of parenting. So it's something not to make you not have kids, but it's something to really stay on top of.
It is. And I think that's where I think we're more savvy about technology as every year goes by, right? Because we start understanding, like my oldest has a phone. Can't take to school. He can't take it to his room. It's got to stay downstairs. He's limited amount of time. And it's my phone. I'm opening it up and looking at it anytime. And I say, your friends know that. And he goes, yeah. And he doesn't have any social media sites. So we've become very savvy on how we do it. And all the studies show is these younger generations when I say younger generations, I'm talking 12 to 18, are starting to pull back from the social. They're starting to pull back from all of this because they know the negativity that comes with it. So there's always that learning curve. And especially social media blew up because we didn't really know we didn't know what it did. It's like the .com bomb, because I'm here in Silicon Valley. My boys asked me, well, what happened? Well, we didn't know what it was. So we figured what we would do is throw money at it. Because if we throw enough money at it, then we'll all make a lot of money. But we didn't know what it did.
Right.
Well, now we're all becoming a lot more versed, right? That that we can pay attention, which is my biggest parenting advice to anyone. Pay attention.
Pay attention. Absolutely. I love the verse, and I use this a lot when Jesus I use it for parents. When Jesus was sending out the disciples, in Matthew 10:16, he says, be as wise as serpents and gentle as doves. And I use this really relative to social media because we always have to be gentle as dove, meaning have a Christ-like spirit and, have love and joy and peace and all the fruit of the Spirit. But we have to be wise as serpents when it comes to technology, because most parents have no clue how much it really affects their kids if their kids are, on TikTok, for instance. And even in the programming on TV, Satan is getting to our kids at younger and younger ages. I'll tell you this is another story that just really hit home. as a grandparent, I'm more worried about my grandkids than I was about my own kids when they were growing up. And a few months ago, I was sitting with my 5-year-old granddaughter and we were watching Trolls. And I'm just sitting there. I don't know anything about it. And she said, "See that boy right there?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "He just had a baby." And I sat there and I said, "What now?" She said, "That boy right there just had a baby. This is in Trolls in a kid's cartoon." And I said, "Well, that's impossible because God made it where, girls have babies and boys are the dads." And she didn't go, "Oh, okay." She said, "Well, that one did." And I thought, what a in my heart punch and a gut punch to me with my granddaughter who I love crazy amounts, seeing already how she's being confused with God's plan by kids' cartoons. It's just, and so you got to be wise as serpents and stay on top of it. I mean, I cannot stress that enough.
And don't be afraid to point it out.
No.
I mean, I do that with my boys, especially boys, right? That I'm having to sit back and go, listen, media companies have an agenda. Movies have an agenda, and they're trying to make everything, they show you this stuff all the time because they're just trying to make it be accepted, right? And you can have your own morals. You don't have to judge anybody, right? I mean, you remember, neither do I judge you. Go and sin no more. Key part of that is go and sin no more. But still, right? That if you can hold forth to your values. You can treat people with kindness. You can treat people with love, can treat people with acceptance within your values. But the moment that they demand that you lose your values to step into their values, now you're creating a conflict that's going to be hard to overcome for you. And you will at some point. You will, because we've raised them to have a deep faith. At some point, the Holy Spirit's not going to leave you. He's going to go, "Hey, right? I mean, you've got to figure out." And that's not to judge anybody else. Everybody else got their own story to tell. But don't ever think that there's not an agenda going on.
100%. Satan has been a master at desensitizing us. It really tracks along with social media pretty much. And if you think about it, and I like to take points in time. Think about when Columbine happened in 99. Yeah. And, it was school shooting, and it was like the biggest thing that happened in a decade. It's all people talked about. We couldn't believe it. And now, if I see a school shooting on TV, it's just another headline. And I don't even really listen that much to it. Or if you think about what Satan's done with drugs, used to, when you and I were young, if you got caught with pot, you're in huge trouble and you're getting arrested and all that. Now it's legal in lots of different places. And, there's different viewpoints on that. And, that's okay, I guess. Or if you think about crime, used to, if you got caught shoplifting, you're dead, as far as, with your parents and with the police. And now up to $950, it's okay. So he's been in our society and in our culture, he's been masterful at making things slowly become okay and then even embraced. If you think about the deviant sexual lifestyles, what used to be wrong became tolerated, and then from tolerated to celebrate. So it's you got to keep your eyes open, man. It's and not to be too alarmist, but I'll say I am alarmist about that.
Yeah, and that's what I go back to pay attention. I mean, because again, whatever your morals are, whatever your standards are, you and I are both Christians, but I know there are some faithful Muslims, some faithful Jews, some faithful Mormons, plenty of people who have a value system, and as long as it's not hurting other people, if it's all about the values that you live within, pay attention. And if you want your children to be raised with morals and values, it's up to you. They had this study, a buddy of mine wrote a book, and he showed me this study. They talked to teenagers between the ages of 15 and 19. And they asked, who do you wish you could spend more time with? The number one answer Parents.
Wow.
Number one answer. Number two answer, and parents was like 58%. Number two was friends at 30%.
Mm-hmm.
So even when they roll their eyes and act like they don't want to, they do. They want those times with you. Create those times. Play the game night. Do stuff. We did it last night. Have to make them sit down and watch a movie with you. Come here. No. Sit down, watch a movie. And at the end of the night, blah, blah, blah. Everybody was having a great time.
That's right.
But they want that time with you, even when you don't think you did. You and I, my parents passed for a long time. And I always tell my boys the same thing. If I could, I don't think there's anything I would not sell that I own to have 5 more minutes with my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so by this time now, I'm not going to be here all the time, but I'll be here, but I plan on spending eternity with you. I always told my kids this: when you get to heaven, first face you see will be Jesus, but who'll be peeking over his shoulder? This guy. Right?
That's right.
So, I look forward to it. Well, I have enjoyed the conversation. I told you I'd go down to 37 different rabbit holes.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
And everything else. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about your music. And have you had any success in the songwriting? Have anybody?
I've written a ton of songs, but you know how Nashville is. It's you can't do it halfway. You've got to be, out there, and I'm not willing to be out there. So it's turned into more of a passion project for me, but I love writing and, recording.
That's my advice. Have it stay fun.
That's right.
Because getting into it, you're right. It is, there's so many athletes who are now in the music business. And Brett Young told me it's the most competitive thing he's ever been in.
Mm-hmm.
And he played pro baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, it's the most competitive thing I've ever been in.
And now AI is going to ruin it anyway.
Yeah.
I think you were talking about how social media has kind of lost its luster because now Chat GPT is going to be the next, .com kind of thing. It's going to be really interesting to see where that all goes.
Yeah. I always sit back and, my favorite saying, and everybody who knows me knows this, is nothing ever turns out the way you think it will.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing ever does. And so it's the fact that the AI, and the first thing that they developed with the AI is how to spot AI. Right. So they've developed bots now who can spot AI.
Right.
So it's always that. And I think it will create more demand for craftsmanship, for the handmade human touch, right? Because I've heard some of these AI songs. At some point, it's just like orange juice and toothpaste.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't. There's words that we all think of it. Tim McGraw's years of bad decision running down her face. AI can't write that because AI hasn't felt it, right? But when we hear that line, we go, "Oh boy!"
Have you ever asked Chat GPT to write lyrics for a song?
No, I've had them write a column in my voice.
Right.
And it's interesting. And if you're listening, I never used it. And even I found it stilted. I'm like, kind of, but I would never have said that.
Mm-hmm.
I would never have brought that up.
My experience, and I'm not a country artist, so I when Chat GPT first came out, I said, I typed in, I forget, like 3 keywords for a country song, like a song about my ex. So I can't remember what it was. And for me, in 10 seconds, it wrote intro, verse, chorus, verse, outro. And it was better than anything I could have ever thought of.
Really?
Yes. I still have it upstairs in my music studio. I couldn't believe it. It was amazingly well written. So we'll see But
Yeah.
keep an eye on AI as it relates to lots of stuff.
Oh, well, we're here in the world of AI. I mean, it was all developed up at
That's
Stanford. And one of the guys who developed it, he said, the thing that we found out about AI, the biggest thing it learned how to do? Lie. It will give you the result that you want, not the result that's right. It will learn what your preferences are, and it will give you the results you want. And he goes, and we can't explain it. We don't know why.
Yeah, we don't know what we have. That's just like when social media came out or the .com. It's who knows what it's going to turn into.
Steve, I've enjoyed this hour. Thank you so much for being generous with your time.
Thank you, Gary. Blessings to you, brother. I really appreciate it.
Blessings to you too. I'll talk to you again.
Sounds good.